The night air in San Antonio tasted like jasmine and trouble. Fiddle music spilled out from the town square, a cheerful sound that felt like a lie. It was Saturday night, summer of 1882, and the whole world was dancing under strings of paper lanterns. Everyone but Elena Vasquez. She stood at the edge of the light, a ghost in a blue cotton dress. At 23, she'd mastered the art of being invisible. Trust was a currency she didn't have, and watching was safer than being watched. She was about to slip back into the shadows she called home when a voice cut through the noise. A voice like aged whiskey. "Ma'am, would you honor me with a dance?" She turned. And there he was. James Morrison. The man the whole town was talking about. A cattle rancher so wealthy he practically bled money. He'd shown up 6 months ago, tall and handsome in his perfectly pressed suits, with green eyes that seemed to strip a person down to their secrets. Every single woman in 3 counties had tried to catch his eye. He'd looked right through them all. But now, he was looking at her. "I don't dance much, Mr. Morrison," Elena said, her voice a flat line. She'd seen him watching her, at church, at the general store, always from a distance. A rich man's attention was a predator's gaze. Her mother had taught her that lesson with her dying breath. "Neither do I, truth be told," James said, and when he smiled, it changed his whole face, softening the sharp edges. "But tonight feels different." He held out his hand. Every instinct, every scar she'd collected over 5 years of running, screamed at her to turn away, to disappear. But she didn't. She placed her hand in his, and that's when she felt the first crack in his story. His palm wasn't soft. It was rough, calloused. These weren't the hands of a man who just counted money. These were the hands of a man who knew how to use them. They stepped onto the dance floor, and the world seemed to fade away. He led her through a slow waltz, his touch gentle, sure. He never pulled her too close, never made her feel like a possession. It was unnerving. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against the music. "More so than usual." Elena's eyes narrowed. "You've been watching me enough to know my usual mood?" A flicker of embarrassment crossed his face, but it was gone in a second. "I suppose I have. You intrigue me, Miss Vasquez. You're the only woman in town who doesn't seem impressed by my name." "Money doesn't make a man trustworthy," she said, the words sharp and sudden. Something unreadable flashed in his eyes. A shadow. "No," he agreed, his voice quiet. "It doesn't." He paused, their steps slowing. "What does?" She looked at him then. Really looked at him, past the expensive suit and the handsome face. She saw a weariness in his eyes that mirrored her own. A weight. "Time," she said. "And truth. Both are rare." The music stopped, but he didn't let go of her hand. "Walk with me," he said, his voice low. "Away from all these watching eyes." Her mind screamed no. Her heart whispered yes. She nodded. He led her past the lanterns, beyond the church, into the quiet garden behind the schoolhouse. The music became a distant memory, replaced by the chirp of crickets. He stopped under a massive cottonwood tree, its leaves whispering secrets in the breeze. "There's something about you," he began, his voice different now, stripped of its public charm. "Something that makes me want to tell you things I've never told anyone." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't," she said, the word coming out faster than she intended. "Secrets are dangerous." He took a step closer, and the space between them crackled with unspoken things. "So is loneliness," he replied. "So is pretending to be someone you're not." The words hit her like a physical blow. He saw it. He saw the facade she'd so carefully built. "Who are you pretending to be, Mr. Morrison?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Call me James," he said, and his rough hand came up to cup her cheek. His touch was like a brand. "And maybe someday I'll be brave enough to tell you." Before she could process the words, before she could erect her walls again, he leaned down and kissed her. It was nothing like she expected. It wasn't a kiss of ownership, of a rich man taking what he wanted. It was soft, questioning. A plea. And for one insane moment, Elena forgot everything. She forgot the running, the fear, the ghosts of her past. She kissed him back, and in that kiss she tasted hope. She tasted danger. Then, the night shattered. A gunshot. A crack of thunder that ripped through the quiet garden. Pain, white-hot and searing, tore through her left shoulder. The force of the bullet spun her sideways, right into James's arms, but the pain was nothing compared to the shock of what he did next. He didn't scream. He didn't panic. In one smooth, lightning-fast motion, he shoved her to the ground, covered her body with his own, and pulled a pistol from the inside of his jacket. The movement was liquid, practiced. The movement of a soldier. Of a killer. "Stay down," he commanded, and his voice was gone. In its place was the voice of a man who lived with death, a cold, hard stranger. Another shot rang out, this time from the church bell tower. James didn't hesitate. He returned fire. 2 quick, precise shots that echoed in the night. Elena heard a sharp cry of pain, then the sickening thud of a body hitting the ground. The cattle rancher was a lie. Everything was a lie. "Are you hit?" James asked, turning back to her. His hands were already on her shoulder, probing the wound with an expertise that made her blood run cold. This was a man who knew his way around a bullet hole. "Just a graze," she managed to say, her own voice sounding distant. Her heart was a wild drum against her ribs. "James, who was that?" she asked. But she already knew he wouldn't tell her the truth. "I don't know," he said. But his eyes were scanning the darkness, not with the confusion of a victim, but with the sharp focus of a predator. He was hunting. "Can you stand?" She nodded, and he helped her up, his body a solid shield between her and the unseen threat. The man who had kissed her so tenderly just moments ago was gone. In his place stood a deadly protector, a man of violence and secrets. "We need to get you to the doctor," he said, holstering his pistol with a familiar ease that turned her stomach. As they hurried back toward the lights of the town square, the one question she couldn't hold back escaped her lips. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" He didn't break his stride. "Every man on the frontier learns to protect himself, ma'am." It was the right answer, a perfect answer, and a complete, total lie. The kiss had been real. She was sure of it. But James Morrison? He was a phantom, a carefully crafted story. And she had just walked right into the middle of it. Back at the dance, chaos erupted. People saw the blood on her blue dress and rushed to help. While Dr. Matthews cleaned and bandaged her shoulder, Elena watched James. He stood with Deputy Morris, speaking in low, calm tones. A portrait of a concerned citizen. But she saw what others missed. She saw how his eyes never stopped moving, scanning the crowd, assessing every face. He answered their questions without revealing a single thing. He was a master of deception. When the night finally bled to its end, he found her again. "I'll see you home," he said. It wasn't a request. She didn't argue. The walk to her little house behind the dress shop was wrapped in a suffocating silence. At her door, he stopped. "Miss Vasquez," he said, his voice losing its hard edge, "I want you to know what happened tonight, before the shooting, the kiss, that was real. Whatever else you might be thinking, please believe that was real." She looked up at him, into those desperate green eyes, and asked the question that was tearing her apart. "And everything else?" He looked away, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "Everyone has secrets," he said, his voice heavy. "The question is whether they're the kind that help people, or the kind that get them killed." Then he was gone, melting back into the night. Inside, Elena sat on her bed, the adrenaline leaving her weak and shaking. She carefully took off the torn dress, the bullet hole a dark, ugly mouth in the fabric. As she folded it, her fingers brushed against something hard in the pocket, something that didn't belong. She pulled it out. It was a small, brass badge, heavy and cool in her palm. It must have fallen from his jacket when he'd pushed her to the ground. Her breath hitched. Her vision swam. Engraved on the surface were 2 words that stopped her heart cold. Pinkerton Detective Agency. The same agency that had murdered her father. Elena dropped the badge as if it were on fire. It clattered on the floorboards, the sound echoing the gunshot that had shattered her life 5 years ago. Pinkerton Detective Agency. The words burned behind her eyes. Suddenly, she wasn't in her small room in San Antonio. She was 16 again, hiding behind a dusty water barrel in Esperanza, her body shaking uncontrollably. She was watching 3 men in dark suits, their faces grim and unforgiving, drag her father from their home. Miguel Vasquez, a blacksmith, a quiet man who smelled of charcoal and iron, who taught her to read from a worn-out Bible. A man who wouldn't hurt a fly. But the Pinkertons, they called him a traitor. They said he was passing secrets to revolutionaries. They said he deserved to die. She could still hear the crunch of their boots on the dry earth. She could still hear her father's voice, raw with desperation, crying out that he was innocent. And then, the terrible, deafening silence after the shots. She remembered running. She ran until her lungs burned and her feet bled. She changed her name from Maria Elena to just Elena. She dyed her hair. She scrubbed the accent from her speech. For 5 long years, she had been a ghost. Invisible. Safe. Until tonight. Until James Morrison. Sleep was a country she couldn't visit. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. The tender man who kissed her, and the cold-blooded killer who returned fire without a moment's hesitation. Which one was real? Or were they both just parts of a monstrous lie? By the time the sun bled across the horizon, she had a plan. Run. Pack her few belongings and vanish before he could come looking for his badge, before he could finish the job his agency had started. She was folding her only other dress into a worn carpet bag when a thought stopped her cold. A dangerous, terrifying thought. If James was a Pinkerton, he was here for a reason. He was hunting someone. What if he wasn't here for her? What if he was here for the men who framed her father? The real killers. The men who wore Pinkerton badges and murdered an innocent blacksmith. Elena dropped the dress. She picked up the badge from the floor, its brass surface cool against her skin. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But now, it was mixed with something else. Something hot and sharp. Anger. A knock on the door made her heart leap into her throat. "Elena, dear, are you all right?" It was Maria Santos, the closest thing she had to a friend in this town, the only one who knew even a fraction of her past. Elena shoved the badge under her pillow and forced her face into a mask of calm before opening the door. Maria bustled in, her round face a mess of worry. "I heard. Dr. Matthews told me you were shot. Who would do such a thing?" "I don't know," Elena lied, the word tasting like ash. She watched her friend, her kind, caring friend, who had given her a job as a seamstress and helped her find this little house. For the first time, she wondered if she could even trust Maria. "That Mr. Morrison brought you home?" Maria chattered on, putting a kettle on the stove. "People are talking, saying he knew just what to do. Like a soldier." "What kind of talking?" Elena asked, her voice tight. "Oh, you know," Maria said, her eyes bright with gossip. "Some say he's more than just a rancher. Some wonder why a rich man needs to carry a gun to a simple town dance. What do you think, Elena?" Elena kept her hand steady as she poured a coffee she didn't want. "I think everyone has secrets." "Including you, dear one," Maria said, her voice suddenly gentle. "You've been jumpy as a stray cat since the day you got here. Sometimes I wonder what you're running from." Another knock cut through the tension. This time, when Elena opened the door, her world tilted. It was James, hat in hand, looking for all the world like a concerned gentleman caller. In the daylight, she saw things she'd missed. The way his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging every detail of the street. The way he stood, slightly angled, as if ready for an attack from any direction. His suit was immaculate, but his boots were caked with fresh dust. He'd been riding. Hard. "Miss Vasquez," he said, his voice formal. "I came to check on your injury, and to apologize for what happened." "You didn't shoot me," she replied, her voice flat. "May I come in?" he asked, and his green eyes locked with hers. It felt like he was looking straight into her soul, searching for the badge she had hidden. She glanced at Maria, who was practically buzzing with excitement. "Of course," Elena said. Maria was just leaving. Maria's face fell, but she grabbed her shawl. "I'll check on you later then. Mr. Morrison, you take good care of our girl." After she left, the silence in the tiny room was a living thing. James stood near the table, just inches from the pillow hiding his secret. "How's the shoulder?" "Sore," Elena said, keeping her distance. "But it will heal." "I'm glad." He took a step toward her. The room suddenly felt very small. "Elena, about last night, before the shooting. I hope you don't think I... Did you?" She cut him off, her voice sharp. He looked taken aback by her bluntness. "No. At least, I hope not. That kiss... it meant something to me. More than it should have, considering..." "Considering what?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration. "Considering I'm not the simple rancher everyone thinks I am." Her pulse hammered. This was it. "Who are you, then?" "Someone who's made more enemies than friends," he said, his words carefully chosen. "Someone whose past could put anyone who gets close to him in danger." It wasn't a confession. It was a warning. She decided to push. "Are you a lawman of some kind?" His face was a mask, but she saw a flicker in his eyes. "What makes you ask that?" "The way you moved last night. Most ranchers don't draw and fire a pistol with that kind of speed." "Most ranchers in Texas have had to fight for their lives at one point or another," he replied smoothly. Another perfect answer. Another perfect lie. "Do you know who shot at us?" "Deputy Morris thinks it was just a random robbery attempt," he said. "And what do you think?" James was quiet for a long, tense moment. "I think someone wanted one of us dead," he said finally, and the honesty in his voice was a shock. "And I don't think it was random at all." "Which one of us?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know. But until I do, I want to keep you safe. Let me escort you. To work. Around town. Just until this is over." Every rational part of her brain told her to say no. To run as far and as fast as she could. But another part, the part that was tired of running, the part that wanted justice for her father, saw an opportunity. This was her chance to watch the watcher. "All right," she said. "But I have a condition." "Name it." "No more lies. If I ask you a direct question, you tell me the truth." He hesitated, a silent battle raging behind his eyes. "There are some things I can't tell you," he said finally. "Not yet. But I swear to you, I will not lie to you." It was the best she was going to get. She nodded. A visible wave of relief washed over him. "Good. I'd like to take you out to my ranch this afternoon. Get you out of town. It might be safer there." Elena agreed. As soon as he left, she pulled the brass badge from under her pillow. The scratches on its surface told a story of long, hard use. Whatever game James was playing, it was deadly serious. But she wasn't going to be a pawn. She wasn't going to run. As she got ready for their ride, she pinned the Pinkerton badge to the inside of her dress, right over her heart. It felt cold against her skin. A constant, chilling reminder. She was done being the hunted. It was her turn to be the hunter. The ride out to the Morrison ranch was deceptively peaceful. James pointed out landmarks, his voice relaxed, but Elena saw the way his hand never strayed far from the pistol on his hip. She felt like a lamb being led to the slaughter. The ranch itself was a sprawling empire of cattle and cash, with a main house big enough to host a governor's ball. But that's not what caught her eye. Tucked away in a grove of oak trees was a small, dilapidated line shack, and a cold dread washed over her. Something about it was sickeningly familiar. "That's where I've been staying," James said, following her gaze. "The big house is too damn empty." As they got closer, the dread in her stomach twisted into a knot of pure ice, the crooked stone chimney, the way the roof sagged on one side. She had seen this place before, in her darkest nightmares. "James," she said, her voice trembling, How long has this cabin been here? 20 years, maybe more, he said, helping her down from her horse. Why? She didn't answer. She walked toward the cabin as if in a trance, each step heavier than the last. She reached the door, her fingers tracing the splintered wood. And then she saw it. Faintly carved into the frame, weathered by years of sun and rain, were 2 letters. M.V. Miguel Vasquez. Her father had been here. Elena? James's voice was a distant echo. Are you all right? She whipped around to face him, her hand flying to the hidden badge. My father! She choked out. He was here! In this cabin! James went completely still, the color draining from his face. What do you mean? 5 years ago, her voice was a ghost of a sound. The night before they killed him, this is where they held him. Elena, he said, his voice urgent, desperate. Listen to me. Your father's name was Miguel Vasquez. He was a blacksmith, killed in Esperanza in 1877. She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as if steeling himself for a blow. He wasn't a traitor, Elena. He was a federal marshal, working undercover. The world stopped spinning. It just stopped. What? He was trying to expose a ring of corrupt officials selling army weapons. The same men I'm here to catch, James said, stepping toward her, his hands raised as if to show he was unarmed. The men who killed him. They weren't real Pinkertons. They were criminals wearing stolen badges. You're lying, she whispered, but the words had no conviction. It felt like the truth. A terrible, world-altering truth. I swear I'm not. He reached slowly into his jacket, not for a gun, but for a worn envelope. These are copies of his reports to the Marshal Service. I've been carrying them for months, hoping I'd find you. Her hands shook as she took the papers. It was his handwriting, her father's neat, careful script, detailing a massive conspiracy led by a man named Colonel Wade Hutchkins. And at the bottom of the last page, a message that shattered her completely. If something happens to me, tell my daughter, Maria Elena, that I died protecting innocent people. Pray she can forgive me for the danger I brought to our family. Tears she hadn't shed in 5 years streamed down her face. All this time, I thought he was a traitor. You're the daughter of a hero, James said, his voice thick with emotion. And I'm the detective who's been hunting his killers for the last 3 years. The pieces clicked into place with sickening speed. You knew, she said, her voice sharp with a new kind of pain. When you asked me to dance, you already knew who I was. He had the decency to look ashamed. Yes, I've been watching you for months. I needed to know if you had any of his evidence. So, the kiss, she said, the words bitter on her tongue. That was just part of the investigation? No! The word was a gunshot in the quiet air. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face. Look at me, Elena. The kiss had nothing to do with my job. My feelings for you are the only thing in this whole damn mess that's real. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. How can I trust you? Because I'm about to risk my life on it, he said, his gaze intense. Colonel Hutchkins is alive. He's running his network right here, out of San Antonio. Deputy Morris is on his payroll. I've been gathering evidence, but I'm missing one piece. A list your father made. A list of all the corrupt officials. Elena's mind reeled. A list. Her father had been so meticulous. If I helped you find it... No, he said, his voice firm. They've already tried to kill you once. I won't put you in any more danger. They murdered my father, she said, a new strength hardening her voice. They let me believe he was a criminal for 5 years. This isn't just your fight anymore. She reached into her dress, pulled out the cold brass badge, and pressed it into his hand. He stared at it, then back at her, his expression a mixture of shock and awe. You knew, he breathed, and you still came with me. I had to know the truth. Then she was on her toes, her lips meeting his, and this time there were no secrets, no lies. It was a kiss of gratitude, of shared purpose, of a fragile, terrifying hope. When they parted, He rested his forehead against hers. "We make a good team." "Yes," she smiled, a real smile. "We do." "So," he asked, "what's our next move?" Before she could answer, a new sound cut through the air, the sound of approaching horses. James spun around, his hand instinctively going to his gun, pulling Elena behind him. Through the trees she saw 3 riders, and her blood ran cold. The person in the lead was Maria. But she wasn't alone. She was flanked by 2 hard-faced men with guns worn low on their hips, and in her own hands Maria was holding a rifle, pointed directly at them. "I'm so sorry, Elena," Maria called out, her voice trembling, but her aim was steady. "You should have just left it alone." The betrayal was a physical blow, harder than any bullet. Maria, her friend, her only confidant, a spy. "Maria, what are you doing?" Elena cried out, her voice breaking. "What I've been paid to do for 5 years," Maria answered, tears streaming down her face. "Watch Miguel Vasquez's daughter. Colonel Hutchkins was patient. He just wanted to see if you knew where your father hid his list. But now that you're working with him—" She trailed off, her gaze fixed on James. The world dissolved into chaos. James fired first. His shot was a blur of motion, catching one of the men in the shoulder and knocking him clean off his horse. The other man returned fire, a bullet splintering the wood of the cabin door, inches from Elena's head. "Get down!" James yelled, shoving her behind the meager cover of the cabin. The gunfight was short, brutal, and loud. When the gun smoke cleared, one of Maria's men was dead. The other was on the ground, clutching a wounded leg, and Maria just sat on her horse sobbing, her rifle now limp in her hands. James kept his pistol trained on her as he approached. "Who else is working for Hutchkins?" "Everyone," she wept. "The deputy, the bank president, the judge. This whole town belongs to him." Elena stepped out from behind the cabin, her heart a shattered mess in her chest. "Did you ever care about me at all, Maria? Was any of it real?" "I loved you like a sister," Maria choked out, her eyes pleading. "That's why I did it. They promised me they wouldn't hurt you as long as you stayed quiet. But you couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Just as Elena started tying a makeshift bandage around the wounded man's leg, a new sound filled the air. A low, growing thunder. "Hoofbeats. A lot of them," James cursed, grabbing Elena's arm. "We have to go. Now." They rounded the corner of the cabin and stopped dead. Their escape was cut off. A line of at least a dozen riders blocked their path, weapons drawn. At their head was a man in his 50s, with cold blue eyes and an air of absolute authority. Elena didn't need an introduction. She was looking at the man who had ordered her father's execution, Colonel Wade Hutchkins. "Miss Vasquez," Hutchkins said, his voice calm and cultured, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Or should I say, Miss Maria Elena Vasquez? Yes. I've known who you were for 5 years." James stepped in front of her, a useless but instinctive gesture. Hutchkins let out a dry laugh. "Put the gun down, Detective Harrison. Oh yes, I know who you are too. Did you really think you could just waltz into my town, into my operation without me knowing about it? I've been watching you since the day you bought that fancy ranch." Elena's head was spinning. "You knew he was a Pinkerton?" "Of course," Hutchkins said, dismounting and walking toward them with the easy confidence of a wolf among sheep. "We let him think he was being clever. We even fed him some information, just to see what he'd do with it. It's so much easier to control your enemies when you write their script for them." His face was grim. "The weapon sales are real. The corruption is real." "Oh yes," Hutchkins smiled. "That's all very real. But the names, the locations, you've been chasing ghosts, Detective. The only thing that ever truly mattered was your father's evidence, Miss Vasquez. The list he compiled before we were forced to silence him." The final piece clicked into place. "That's why you kept me alive," Elena said, her voice flat. "You were using me as bait, hoping I'd lead you to it." "Clever girl," he said, his smile never reaching his cold eyes. "Just like your father. Unfortunately, you're also just as stubborn. We had hoped you'd find it quietly. Instead, you had to fall in love with a federal agent. It complicates things." "I don't know where my father hid anything," she lied. her voice desperate. Perhaps not, Hutchkins conceded. But a child's memory is a funny thing. Maria has been most helpful, telling us all about your little routines, your habits. Tell me, Miss Vasquez, where did your father like to take you when you were a little girl? What was your special place? The blood drained from her face. His last words to her, whispered through the bars of a jail cell. If anything happens to me, remember our special place, Maria Elena. She thought it was just a comforting phrase. What if it was a clue? Hutchkins saw the recognition in her eyes. Ah, there it is. Excellent. You're going to take us there. And Detective Harrison will accompany us, just to ensure your full cooperation. James raised his pistol. Like hell I will. Actually, Hutchkins said, snapping his fingers, you will. Two of his men dragged a battered, bleeding figure from behind their horses. It was Deputy Morris. Morris here got greedy, Hutchkins explained casually. Tried playing both sides. It didn't end well for him. But he knows where a lot of bodies are buried. If you don't cooperate, Detective, I will kill him. Slowly. Then I'll kill Miss Vasquez, just as slowly. And then, when you've watched them both die, I will finally kill you. James's shoulders slumped in defeat. There were too many guns, too much ground to cover. It was a trap with no exit. As rough hands tied her wrists, her eyes met James's across the yard. He gave her the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. It was a promise. This wasn't over. They were just waiting for their moment. But as they were forced onto horses, surrounded by killers, Elena wondered if that moment would ever come. The cemetery was a silent city of the dead, its weathered headstones like crooked teeth against the moonlit sky. As they rode up the hill, the memory of her father's funeral washed over Elena, a cold wave of grief and fear. She had stood on this very spot, 17 and utterly alone, with only Maria to comfort her. The irony was a bitter pill. This is it, she said, her voice hollow, as Hutchkins' men pulled her from her horse. Her father's grave was marked by a simple wooden cross. Miguel Vasquez. No mention of his sacrifice. No hint of the hero he truly was. Hutchkins strolled over to the grave, nudging the cross with the toe of his expensive boot. Such a plain marker for a man who caused so much trouble. Now where is it, girl? Elena stared at the cross, her mind racing. Remember our special place. This wasn't it. Their special place was an old oak tree by the creek, miles from here. This was a place of sorrow, a place of endings. Was he bluffing? Was this all a lie? I don't know, she said, and it was the honest truth. This isn't our special place. Hutchkins' face darkened into a thundercloud. Don't play games with me. Maria told us you came here every month. Because I was grieving, she snapped, the anger overriding her fear. Not because I was on a treasure hunt. One of Hutchkins' men backhanded her across the face. The blow sent her stumbling, the taste of blood sharp in her mouth. James lunged, even with his hands bound, but two rifles were instantly shoved against his chest. Easy, Detective, Hutchkins warned. Elena straightened up, meeting the colonel's cold gaze. Beating me won't make something appear out of thin air. Perhaps not, Hutchkins said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. But it might motivate your friend. He nodded to his men. They dragged James over and forced him to his knees beside the barely conscious Deputy Morris. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Morris was a mess of blood and bruises, a testament to Hutchkins' cruelty. Let me think, Elena said, buying them precious seconds. She saw James subtly testing the ropes that bound his wrists. He gave her a tiny shake of his head. Not yet. She walked a slow circle around the grave, forcing her mind back through the years. Her father had been different in those last weeks. Secretive. He'd started locking the small leather journal he carried everywhere. She'd assumed the Pinkertons had taken it. But what if they hadn't? What if he'd known they were coming? She dropped to her knees, ignoring the sting in her lip, and started digging with her bare hands in the soft dirt near the headstone. He'd want it close, she whispered to herself. He wouldn't have left it. That's it, Hutchkins said, his voice laced with greedy anticipation. You remember. Her fingers hit something hard, a small metal box, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the damp earth. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pulled it free. "Open it," Hutchins commanded. With trembling hands, she unwrapped the cloth and lifted the lid. Inside lay her father's journal. But tucked inside the journal was a folded map, covered in markings. Hutchins snatched it from her hands, his eyes scanning the pages under the dim lantern light. His face went from triumph to confusion, then to pure, unadulterated rage. "This is impossible," he snarled. "These names, these dates. Some of this information is from after your father died." Elena peered at the last few pages of the journal. The handwriting was different. It wasn't her father's. "Morris," James said, his voice quiet but clear. "He was trying to finish what your father started." Deputy Morris lifted his bloodied head, a spark of defiance in his swollen eyes. "Miguel was my partner," he rasped. "We were both undercover. I've been documenting everything since he died." "You fool!" Hutchins screamed, his composure finally cracking. He leveled his pistol at Morris's head. In that split second, the world exploded. James rolled sideways, kicking the legs out from under his guard and snatching the man's fallen rifle. At the same time, Elena threw herself at Hutchins, slamming into his side. His shot went wild, the bullet singing past Morris's ear. The cemetery became a whirlwind of gunfire and chaos. Elena crawled toward Morris, ignoring the burn as a stray bullet grazed her already injured shoulder. James moved with deadly efficiency, a ghost in the moonlight, taking down Hutchins' men one by one. She reached Morris and started frantically working on his ropes. "The evidence," Morris gasped. "Get it to Marshal Williams in Austin. He's the only one we can trust." Suddenly James was there, a cut bleeding on his forehead, but alive. "How many left?" Elena scanned the battlefield of headstones. 3 of Hutchins' men were down. Hutchins himself was gone. "He ran," James said, his voice a low growl. "But it's not over." "Yes," Elena said, scooping up the journal and the map from the dirt. "It is." As if on cue, a new sound rose above the ringing in her ears. More riders. But these weren't Hutchins' thugs. In the moonlight, their federal badges gleamed like stars. "Marshal Williams," Morris whispered, slumping in relief. "I sent word." As the marshals secured the scene, Elena stood over her father's grave. The simple wooden cross no longer looked like a marker of shame. It was a monument. "We did it, Papa," she whispered to the wind. "It's finally over." 3 weeks later, the Texas sunrise felt different. It felt like a promise. Elena sat on the porch of the ranch house, their ranch house, a cup of coffee warming her hands. Her shoulder had a new scar to match the old one, but the wounds on the inside were finally starting to heal. James came out and sat beside her, moving with the careful stiffness of a man still mending from a fight. Colonel Hutchins had been caught trying to cross the border into Mexico. With the evidence from the journal, his entire criminal empire had crumbled. 17 corrupt officials were behind bars. Justice, it turned out, was a slow, patient hunter. "Any word from the marshal?" she asked. "He'll be here this afternoon," James said, his voice soft. "With the official papers. Your father's name is cleared, Elena. They're giving him the Texas Star of Honor." Tears welled in her eyes, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of sorrow. "He would have been so proud," she whispered. "Not of the medal, of the truth." "He'd be proud of you," James said, taking her hand. "You never stopped fighting." She looked at him, really looked at the man behind the lies and the badges. James Harrison. A man who had resigned from the Pinkertons the day after the shootout. A man who, like her, was looking for a fresh start. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Marshal Williams offered you a job." He was quiet for a long moment, watching a hawk circle high above. "I'm done with that life," he said. "Turns out, what I really want is to wake up every morning next to the woman I love. To build something that lasts. With someone who sees me for who I really am." Her heart did a little flip. "And who are you, really, James Harrison?" "I'm a man who's tired of living lies," he said, turning to face her. his green eyes serious and full of a light she'd never seen before. A man who wants to raise cattle on this land with a brave, brilliant, stubborn woman who saved his life in a cemetery. She felt the last of her defenses melt away. That woman wouldn't happen to be me, would she? If she'll have me, he said, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a simple gold ring. Elena Vasquez, will you marry me? Not because we survived something terrible, but because I love you more than my next breath. She looked from the ring to his face, and all she saw was truth. You know, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. I never trusted love before. I thought it was a trap. And now? He asked, his voice hopeful. Now I know it's about choosing to fight for each other, every single day. She held out her hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. Is that a yes? He breathed. That's a yes to everything, she said, and leaned in to kiss him. It was a kiss that tasted of coffee and sunshine, and a future she'd never dared to dream of. She rested her head on his shoulder, looking out at the land that was now their home. I love you, James Harrison, she whispered. I love you too, Elena Vasquez, soon to be Harrison, he replied, holding her tight. And I promise you'll never have to be afraid again. The sun climbed higher, chasing the last of the shadows away, and for the first time in her life, Elena felt completely and utterly at peace. She had found her home. She had found her future. She had found a love worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story of secrets and justice, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.